Yo, well, hello there. Welcome back to my floor in front of my bed with a cup of decaf coffee and the book All About Love by Bell Hooks. If you don't know, we've been reading through this book in our book club. If you want to learn about the book club, if you'd like to be part of the community, you can go down to the link in my bio, check it out, join through Patreon, all that good stuff. We go through books, sometimes we watch shows together. Right now, we are reading this book for the month of February 2023, depending on when you're seeing this. And we're also watching episodes of Ted Lasso together because the third season of Ted Lasso comes out next month, and we're super stoked about it. So if you want to be a part of that community, you can join there. Until then, if this helps you to fall asleep or learn something, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section down in the doobly-doo. My name is Sam, also known as Dope Dad, in other social media spaces, including TikTok and Instagram. If you want to interact with me over there, you can definitely do that. That's where most of my content comes from. And what we try to do here is create some more long form content. The worst thing about this book is that there's not an audio version of it. So hopefully I am providing a valuable service for all you other Bell Hook fans. I love this book, and basically we're gonna read through it, and then I'm just gonna kind of react to it and just give you my thoughts, what it makes me think about as we learn and grow together. We are on chapter 4. Chapter 4 is called Commitment. Let it love, wait, sorry, man, I always started. There's like a thing that happens in my brain where it's like, if it's on this track, which is the talking track, and then I need to switch to the reading track, it takes a second. And anytime I try to jump right into these, it does not work. Chapter 4, Commitment. Let love be love in me. Commitment is inherent in any genuine, loving relationship. Anyone who is truly concerned for the spiritual growth of another knows, consciously or instinctively, that he or she can significantly foster that growth only through a relationship of constancy. I almost said consistency, it says constancy. M. Scott Peck. Commitment to truth-telling lays the groundwork. If you're coming into this book late, the previous chapter, chapter 3, is about commitment to truth-telling as a component of love. You can check the playlist. Commitment to truth-telling lays the groundwork for the openness and honesty that is the heartbeat of love. When we can see ourselves as we truly are and accept ourselves, we build the necessary foundation for self-love. Is it too early in the chapter to rabbit trail? I'll just say that self-love was super hard for me to learn, and I'm sure we'll get into it more, but just keep that in mind. If you're having difficulties learning how to love yourself, stay tuned. We'll talk about it. Come hang out with me over on Discord. We have all heard the maxim, if you do not love yourself, you will be unable to love anyone else. It sounds good. Yet more often than not, we feel some degree of confusion when we hear this statement. The confusion arises because most people who think they are not lovable have this perception because at some point in their lives they were socialized to see themselves as unlovable by forces outside their control. We are not born knowing how to love anyone, either ourselves or somebody else. However, we are born able to respond to care. As we grow, we can give and receive attention, affection, and joy. Whether we learn how to love ourselves and others will depend on the presence of a loving environment. I'd like to hear from any of y'all. Like, were any of you taught how to love yourself? Like, I think I was taught things around it, right? But it wasn't, especially growing up in a religious context, you didn't want to do anything that would have been perceived as prideful, right? So it was like a fine line, at least in the context that I grew up in. And I've heard of people that grew up in contexts where you couldn't boast in anything that you accomplished, right? And even when you did have an accomplishment, right? Let's say you did something well, like in my church youth group, I was in the drama club and all this sort of stuff. If you did well, it was because the Lord had gifted you, not because you were innately gifted. And I know that's not what people were saying, but functionally it carries a message that I'm not good enough on my own, right? That I'm only good in as much as I do something for someone else, in this case, the church or God. And those, if you're religious, are completely fine things. But then, like, where is the room for you to do something because you love to do it, right? Like, that's an act of self-love. I love this activity. I'm going to do this activity. Well, why are you doing it? Are you doing it for the Lord? Are you doing it because I want to? And like the idea that you can just do something because you want to, at least for me, was not a normal concept growing up. Self-love cannot flourish in isolation. It is no easy task to be self-loving. Simple axioms that make self-love sound easy only make matters worse. It leaves many people wondering why, if it is so easy, they continue to be trapped by feelings of low self-esteem or self-hatred. Using a working definition of love that tells us it is an action we take on behalf of our own or another's spiritual growth provides us with a beginning blueprint for working on the issue of self-love. When we see love as a combination of trust, commitment, care, respect, knowledge, and responsibility, we can work on developing these qualities, or if they are already part of who we are, we can learn to extend them to ourselves. I will just say, in a nutshell, that has very much been my journey. In therapy, in and outside of therapy, because my therapist says to go do something, I go do the work. You know what I mean? Like, I don't just sit around and wait for the next session. I'm like, I gotta get to the bottom of this. And in the ability to show grace and compassion to others, for example, is directly proportional to how I've learned to show grace and compassion to myself. And to do that, I first had to believe that I was actually worthy of that grace and compassion. It's a whole thing, y'all. Many people find it helpful to critically examine the past, particularly childhood, to chart their internalization of messages that we're not worthy, not enough, that we're crazy, stupid, monstrous, and so on. That you're too much, that you need to settle down, that you're too dramatic, you're too sensitive. I added those for you in case any of those fall onto your shoulders. Simply learning how we have acquired feelings of worthlessness rarely enables us to change things. It is usually only one stage in the process. Yes, I feel a lot of people stop there. I, like so many other people, have found it useful to examine negative thinking and behavioral patterns learned in childhood, particularly those shaping my sense of self-identity. However, this process alone did not ensure self-recovery. That's good. Self-discovery leading to self-recovery. That's a good framework. If you're like early on in your healing journey, I know for me, it's a lot of, oh shit, oh my God, that's where that comes from. And if you don't realize that you're also on not just discovering things up to bring them up, right? You're not just rediscovering trauma to just live with it. You're rediscovering trauma, you're bringing trauma up in an intentional way so that you can recover, right? So I like that. Self-recovery. It was not enough. I share this because it is far too easy to stay stuck in simply telling one story over and over again, which can be a way of holding on to grief about the past or holding on to a narrative that, I didn't mean to kick my camera, that places blame on others. Yeah, I think that's exactly how people get stuck in these victim mentalities, right? It's always a question. I've known people that have found a myriad of different ways to cope, and from my perspective, from my observation, it's like, man, I don't know if that's healthy. And, I normally keep these thoughts to myself and just try to meet the people where they're at. But like, there'll be this thing where you can tell they're stuck because like every conversation revolves around how they're actually doing better than they appear. Like, I know it looks like, but I'm really in when you bring up some of their coping behaviors, they're like, I just, and it's this minimalizing of something that is visibly detrimental to them. And And then they normally end up justifying it. Well, I've just been through so much, right? Something along those lines. And that's super true. But maybe it's a way to holding on to the grief about the past or holding on to a narrative that places blame on others. True narratives that can be true. Like, with people that get stuck in victim mentalities, it's not that you're not a victim. You very much are. But again, it's that self-discovery that leads to self-recovery. While it is important for us to understand the origins of fragile self-esteem, it is also possible to bypass this stage, identifying when and where we received negative socialization and still create a foundation for building self-love. Individuals who bypass this stage tend to move on to the next stage, which is actively introducing into our lives constructive, life-affirming thought patterns and behavior. Whether a person remembers the details of being abused is not important. That is true. We can talk about that in another video. Let me know if you want me to rabbit trail on some of the things that I've learned in therapy. I will be more than happy to tell you. Whether a person remembers the details of being abused is not important. When the consequences of that abuse is a feeling of worthlessness, they can still engage in a process of self-recovery by finding ways to affirm self-worth. The wounded heart learns self-love by first overcoming low self-esteem. Nathaniel Branden's lengthy work, 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, highlights important dimensions of self-esteem. The practice of living consciously, self-acceptance, self-responsibility, self-assertiveness, living purposefully, and the practice of personal integrity. We're going to highlight that one, y'all. Oh, you can't even tell, what that is. Let's see. The wounded heart learns self-love by first overcoming low self-esteem. The practice of living consciously. These are the dimensions. The practice of living consciously, self-acceptance, self-responsibility, self-assertiveness, living purposefully, and the practice of personal integrity. Living consciously means we think critically about ourselves and the world we live in. We dare to ask ourselves the basic questions: who, what, when, where, and why. Answering these questions usually provides us with a level of awareness that enlightens. Branden contends, to live consciously means to seek to be aware of everything that bears on our actions, purposes, values, and goals. I will tell you, if you are in therapy, if you are on this journey, and you start to become self-aware, it can become fairly lonely. But the people you do meet that are on a similar journey are some of the deepest, best connections you've ever had. Truly, truly, truly. And you'll find that I don't want to say patience, because at least for me, I don't know, your journey's different. I can have lots of patience for people, but my tolerance to being around people that aren't living consciously is pretty paper thin. It's just I have pleasant interactions, I can hang out, participate in activities, but it's, you know what I mean? I can be very friendly and have good relationships with people like that, but it ends up taking more energy to maintain that relationship than the relationship gives. Whereas people that are on a similar journey and working to become more conscious, it's energizing, at least in my experience. But I'm also a bit of an extrovert. Here's a first sip of decaf right here. There's a little greedy grits from my coffee in my coffee. I need to clean out my coffee thing. Whatever the ability may be, and to behave in accordance with that which we see and know. To live consciously, we have to engage in critical reflection about the world we live in and know most intimately. So self-discovery, self-recovery, self-reflection. She didn't say that. I'm just putting it, well, she did, but I'm just putting it together for you. Usually it is through reflection and that individuals who have not accepted themselves make the choice to stop listening to negative voices. Usually it is through reflection that individuals who have not accepted themselves make the choice to stop listening to negative voices within and outside the self that constantly reject and devalue them. Affirmations work for anyone striving for self-acceptance, although I had 4 years been interested in therapeutic models of healing and self-help. Affirmations always seemed to me a bit corny. My sister, who was then working as a therapist in the field of chemical dependency, encouraged me to give affirmations a try to see if I would experience any concrete changes in my outlook. I wrote affirmations relevant to my daily life and began to repeat them in the morning as part of my daily meditations. At the top of the list was the declaration, I'm breaking with old patterns and moving forward with my life. I not only found them to be tremendous energy boost, a way to kick off the day by accentuating the positive, I also found it useful to repeat them during the day if I felt particularly stressed or was falling into the abyss of negative thinking. Affirmations help restore my emotional equilibrium. Self-acceptance, I'll share a quick practice. My therapist has a Patreon, which I'm on too, so I get like extra content from my therapist. But she was talking about, her name is LaShonda, if you don't know. She was talking about how her and her husband have developed this practice. Like she'll wake up in the morning and she will say like, how or where will abundance find me today? And it trains her to start looking for abundance because we have like a negativity bias, right? It's a feature of our humanity. And then at the end of the day, her husband will check in with her and be like, how did abundance find you? And sometimes she says it's just like, I sat with my daughter and we took a nap together and so it's kind of, and I've told people this practice, I have not started practicing it, but I probably should. But she says it's training her brain to look for areas of abundance, right? Instead of just getting caught up in the drag of day-to-day living, which is like a thing, you know what I mean? So yeah, you take that little tool from my therapist. I'll tell you what, why don't y'all practice it and come back and I will practice it. And then you can join the Discord through Patreon and tell me about it. Tell me how it's working for you. For me, particularly right now, my work is super busy. And I think it's less about putting a positive spin on things, right? Like, oh, I'm super busy, so I don't have as much time at home, but at least I'm making good money. Like, that's true. But I think abundance is looking for the things that give you joy, that give you room, that help you feel expansive. So like, I feel good that work is busy and I'm making more money than normal because of that. But that just makes me feel secure, which is important. It makes me feel good. But is it that thing where I'm just like, this is it? You know what I mean? Probably not. Probably not. Self-acceptance is hard for many of us. There is a voice inside that is constantly judging. First ourselves and then others. Mine tends to stay on myself. I don't like it. That voice enjoys the indulgence of an endless negative critique. Because we have learned to believe negativity is more realistic, it appears more real than any positive voice. Once we begin to replace negative thinking with positive thinking, it becomes utterly clear that far from being realistic, negative thinking is absolutely disenabling. When we are positive, we not only accept and affirm ourselves, we are able to affirm and accept others. The more we accept ourselves, the better prepared we are to take responsibility in all areas of our lives. Commenting on this third pillar of self-esteem, Brendan defines self-responsibility as the willingness to take responsibility for my actions and the attainment of my goals for my life and my well-being. Self-responsibility as the willingness to take responsibility for my actions and the attainment of my goals for my life and well-being. Taking responsibility does not mean that we deny the reality of institutionalized injustice. For example, racism, sexism, and homophobia all create barriers and concrete incidents of discrimination. Simply taking responsibility does not mean that we can prevent discriminatory acts from happening, but we can choose how we respond to acts of injustice. Taking responsibility means that in the face of barriers, we still have the capacity to invent our lives, to shape our destinies in ways that maximize our well-being. Every day we practice this shape-shifting to cope with realities we cannot easily change. Many women are married to men who were unsupportive when they decided to further their educations. Most of these women did not leave the men in their lives. They engaged in constructive strategies of resistance. One woman I spoke with was inhibited because her husband worked in a plant and she felt uncomfortable having more education than he did. Yet, she wanted to re-enter the workforce and needed an advanced degree to do so. She made the choice to take responsibility for her needs and desires, believing it would also enhance the well-being of her family. Returning to work boosted her self-esteem and changed the passive-aggressive rage and depression that had developed as a consequence of her isolation and stagnation. Making this decision and finding ways to realize it was not an easy process, however. Her husband and children were often disgruntled with her independence. Oh, sorry, I read that funny. Her husband and children were often disgruntled when her independence forced them to accept more household responsibility. In the long run, everyone benefited. And it goes without saying that these changes boosted her self-esteem in ways that showed her how self-love made it possible to extend herself in a constructive way to others. She was happier, and so were those around her. In order to make these changes, she had to make use of another vital aspect of self-esteem, self-assertiveness. Defined by Brandon as the willingness to stand up for myself, to be who I am openly, to treat myself with respect in all human encounters. My partner is super good at that. Super good at that. I learned so much from them. They're amazing. Since many of us were shamed in childhood, either in our families of origin or in school settings, a learned pattern of going along with the program and not making a fuss is the course of action we most frequently choose as a way to avoid conflict. It makes me think there's sometimes these conversations, right? Like when people, particularly younger generations, start showing themselves self-love, right? And especially in academic and workplaces, and they start demanding fair accommodations. They start demanding fair wages. They start demanding, good benefits and time off because their lives are more important than their work, right? And they're actually practicing self-assertiveness. They're actually practicing self-love. And then what is the kind of like poo-pooing that happens typically from older generations? They go, well, that's just how it is. Why are you causing a fuss? It's these kids that don't want to work and this new generation. And it's like, actually, maybe they're doing what you wish you could have done. Maybe, granted, it was a lot easier to work when you were younger because you could afford to live off what you make. But now that's not the case. And so lots of people, where it is resistance and defiance to the system, right? It really is honoring themselves and respecting themselves first. I don't deserve to be treated that way. And just imagine, you hear about like the working conditions in Amazon facilities, right? And we're not even talking like third world where there's no regulation and they're exploiting. We're talking about here where there is supposed to be a regulatory body. And imagine if like en masse people woke up to this, that they were all of a sudden, everybody was willing to be self-assertive, and not in an assholey way, but in a way that was like, I deserve respect. I don't deserve to be treated this way, and neither do you. Like, how quick would work conditions change, right? How quick would, laws change, or the way we approach people in society, right? I think it would happen really quick. And so you could almost see that a lot of societal ills are based in people not loving each other. And that based in not loving each other, or loving themselves rather, is based in the messages that they receive, right? The messages they receive that say they're not worthy of that love. And one of those things, going back to, I know I'm rabbit trailing hardcore, but my brain's connecting dots and you're along for the ride. And one of those things is like in this capitalist system we live in, you are what you earn, right? Oh, you need to make a good living. If you don't make a good living, you're not trying hard enough. And if you're not trying hard enough, then you're not deserving. And the truth is, that's totally backwards. You are deserving. We start with that. We start that you are deserving. You are worthy. And at least for me, that was the thing, right? Is like unpacking all the things that my brain will latch onto to tell me that I wasn't deserving, that I wasn't worthy, that I wasn't lovable, and go, no, we start with lovableness. We start with worthiness. We start with deservedness. And then we look at the systems and the things that are in place that keep that from people and go, that's messed up. Not me. That's messed up. Not you. That's messed up. Anyway, I'll get off of my soapbox and keep reading. Since many of us were shamed in childhood, either in our families of origin or in school settings, a learned pattern of going along with the program and not making a fuss is the course of action we most frequently chose as a way to avoid conflict. As children, conflict was often the setting for put-downs and humiliation, the place where we were shamed. Our attempts at self-assertion failed as an adequate defense. Many of us learned that passivity lessened the possibility of attack. Sexist socialization teaches females that self-assertiveness is a threat to femininity. Accepting this faulty, right? So this will happen in my TikToks all the time when I talk about women's issues and I talk about dudes not being douches. I'm like, bros, you shouldn't do that. People will come in and be like, well, women need to submit. That is push down their self-assertiveness, or another way of saying that. Accepting, I don't agree with that, by the way. I'm just telling you what the toxic dude bros tell me in my comments before I block them. Accepting this faulty logic lays the groundwork for low self-esteem. The fear of being self-assertive usually surfaces in women who have been trained to be good girls or dutiful daughters. In our childhood home, my brother was never punished for talking back. Asserting his opinions was a positive sign of manhood. When my sisters and I voiced our opinions, we were told by our parenting adults that this was negative and undesirable behavior. We were told, especially by our dad, that female self-assertion was not feminine. We did not listen to these warnings, even though ours was a patriarchal household. The fact that females far outnumbered the two males, my dad and my brother, made it safe for us to speak our minds, to talk back. Luckily, by the time we were young adults, the feminist movement had come along and validated that having a voice and being self-assertive was necessary for building self-esteem. Sip. Maybe one day I'll put some Kahlua in here. And as I drink, we'll see if if my reading progressively gets worse. Like, no, that is not already bad. One reason women have traditionally gossiped more than men is because gossip has been a social interaction wherein women have felt comfortable stating what they really think and feel. Often, rather than asserting what they think at the appropriate moment, women say what they think will please the listener. Later, they gossip, stating at the moment their true thoughts. This division between a false self invented to please others and a more authentic self need not to exist when we cultivate positive self-esteem. The feminist movement really helped women understand the personal power that is gained through positive self-assertiveness. Gloria Steinem's bestseller, Revolution from Within, cautioned women about the danger of achieving success without doing the necessary groundwork for self-love and self-esteem. That's interesting. She found that achieving women who still suffered internalized self-hatred invariably acted out in ways that undermined their success. And if the self-hating successful person did not act out, she may have lived a life of private desperation, unable to tell anyone's success does not, in fact, reverse crippled self-esteem. To complicate matters, women may feel the need to pretend that they are self-loving, to assert confidence and power to the outside world. As a consequence, they feel psychologically conflicted and disengaged from their true being. Shamed by the feeling that they can never let anyone know who they really are, they may choose isolation and aloneness for fear of being unmasked. This is true for men as well. When powerful men reach the height of personal achievement in their careers, they often undermine all they have worked for by engaging in self-destructive behavior. Men who reside at the bottom of our nation's economic totem pole do this, and so do men at the top. President Clinton engaged in deceitful behavior, betraying both his personal commitments to his family as well as political commitment to be a paragon of American values to the people of this country. He did so when his popularity was at an all-time high. Having spent much of his life achieving against the odds, his actions expose a fundamental flaw in his self-esteem. Although he is a white male, Ivy League educated, and economically well off, privileged, with all the accompanying perks, his irresponsible actions were a way of unmasking, of showing to the world that he really was not the good guy. He was pretending to be. He created the context for a public shaming that no doubt mirrors moments of childhood shaming when some authority figure in his life made him feel he was worthless and that he would never be worthy no matter what he did. Anyone who suffers from low self-esteem can learn by his example. If we succeed without confronting and changing shaky foundations of low self-esteem rooted in contempt and hatred, we will falter along the way. That is a unique perspective on President Clinton, and I'm not sure if I agree. I agree, I see what you're doing, and I think I agree, but then I'm also like, that's a lot of leaps to make without knowing that person, right? As just an outside observer making that observation, I feel like, and I love bell hooks, but I feel like it's a bit of a projection. But I also hold that she could absolutely be right. And I do think the phenomena that she's talking about, maybe it's just not the best example. Granted, the book was written in the 90s, but it's but I agree with the phenomenon. I see the phenomenon she's talking about, that people who seem to have privilege and wealth, they get to this place of power, and in a way they self-sabotage, and that self-sabotaging is rooted in self-esteem, in poor self-esteem, right? I do agree. I don't know. I'll just have to think about it more. Let me know what you think. It is no accident that living purposefully is the sixth element of self-esteem, according to Brandon. It entails taking responsibility for consciously creating goals, identifying the actions necessary to achieve them, making sure our behavior is in alignment with our goals, and paying attention to the outcome of our actions so that we see whether they are leading us where we want to go. Most people, when I got divorced, and my divorce was final, I spent a little bit of time having not read this book, but having done some therapy and some self-reflection of just figuring out what my alignments were. And it was just what are the things that I want to do? What are the things that bring me joy? What are the things that light me up? When it comes to my kids, what do I want to do? If I could choose anything for us, what would that look like? And I'm not saying I'm going to get there, right? If it was up to me, me and my kids would just travel the world and see all, and maybe we'll get to do some of that. Maybe we'll get to do none of that. But that focus is what allows me to step into moments with my kids, because now I'm looking kind of like how we talked about looking for abundance, right? Now, because I have this big desire to create memories and share experiences with my kids, and it would be cool to have this, cinematic movie-esque version of that, where we just have money is not an option and we can just go wherever we want and we can see the world and see all the beautiful things and eat all the wonderful food, right? Well, maybe that it's not that, but it causes me to look for the ways to do that now in the limitations that I do currently operate in with what we do have, right? And it's very much this. It's well, if this is where I want to go, what are the steps to get there? And even if I don't get all the way there, I'm going to get closer than I am now. And closer than I am now feels better than just staying here, in a place where I don't want to be. Most people do not grow up learning that the work we choose to do will have major impact on our capacity to be self-loving. Oh wait, I skipped a part. I apologize. Most people are concerned about living purposefully when it comes to choosing the work we do. Unfortunately, many workers feel they have very little freedom of choice when it comes to work. Yeah. Most people do not grow up learning that the work we choose to do will have major impact on our capacity to be self-loving. Work occupies much of our time. Doing work we hate assaults our self-esteem and self-confidence. Yet most workers cannot do the work they love. But we can all enhance our capacity to live purposefully by learning how to experience satisfaction in whatever work we do. When we find the satisfaction, get tongue-tied. We find that satisfaction by giving any job total commitment. When I had a teaching job I hated, the kind of job where you long to be sick so you have an excuse for not going to work, the only way I could ease the severity of my pain was to give it my absolute best. I've done this before where it's like, this sucks, this is whatever, but my goal is to walk away from it knowing that I did the best I possibly could. This strategy enabled me to live purposefully. Doing a job well, even if we do not enjoy what we are doing, means that we leave it with a feeling of well-being with our self-esteem intact. That self-esteem aids us when we go in search of a job that can be more fulfilling. Throughout my life, I have endeavored to not only do work I enjoy, but to work with individuals I respect, like, or love. When I first declared my desire to work in a loving environment, friends acted as though I had truly lost my mind. Yeah, like, how many people, like, hey, you graduated college, like, what kind of job do you want to do? Well, I want to just, like, work in a very loving environment. And what if that was the norm, though? What if that's, like, what we required? You know, what if everybody, using Amazon again as an example, what if everybody that worked at Amazon, they were like, it's the most loving environment I've ever been a part of. I don't know what that looks like. It'd be interesting though. When I first declared my desire to work in a loving environment, friends acted as though I had truly lost my mind. To them, love and work did not go together. But I was convinced that I would work better in a work environment shaped by an ethic of love. Today, as the Buddhist concept of right livelihood is more widely understood, I've never heard of that concept, I'll have to look it up. Right livelihood is more widely understood, more people embrace the belief that work enhances our spiritual well-being and strengthens our capacity to love. And when we work with love, we create a loving working environment. Whenever I enter an office, I can immediately sense by the overall atmosphere a mood whether the workers like what they do. Marcia Sintier writes about this concept in her book, Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow, as a way of encouraging readers to take the risk of choosing work they care about and therefore learning through experience the meaning of right livelihood. While there are many meaningful insights in Sintier's book, it is equally true that we can do what we love and money will not always follow. Although this is utterly disappointing, it can also offer us the experiential awareness that doing what you love may be more important than making money. Sometimes, as has been the case in my life, I've had to work at a job that is less than enjoyable in order to have the means to do the work that I do love. At one point in my very mixed job career, I worked as a cook in a club. I hated the noise and the smoke, but working nights left me free to write in the day, to do the work that I truly wanted to do. Each experience enhanced the value of the other. My nighttime work helped me relish the quiet serenity of my day and enjoy the alone time so essential to my writing. Whenever possible, it is best to seek work we love and to avoid work we hate. But sometimes we learn what we need to avoid by doing it. That's true. Individuals who are able to be economically self-sufficient doing what they love are blessed. Their experience serves as a beacon to all of us, showing us the ways right livelihood can strengthen self-love, ensuring peace and contentment in the lives we lead beyond work. Often, workers believe that if their home life is good, it does not matter if they feel dehumanized and exploited on the job. Many jobs undermine self-love because they require that workers constantly prove their worth. Somebody in this video that's not bell hooks was just saying that earlier. Many jobs undermine self-love because they require that workers constantly prove their worth. Individuals who are dissatisfied and miserable on the job bring this negative energy home. Yep. Clearly, much of the violence in domestic life, both physical and verbal abuse, is linked to job misery. We can encourage friends and loved ones to move towards greater self-love by supporting them in any effort to leave work that assaults their well-being. Folks who are out of the paid workforce, women and men who do unpaid work in the home, as well as other happily unemployed people, are often doing what they want to do. While they are not rewarded by an income, their day-to-day life often provides more satisfaction than it would if they worked at a high-paying job in a stressful and dehumanizing environment. Satisfied homemakers, both women and the rare men who have chosen to stay home, have a lot to teach us about the joy that comes from self-determination. They are their own bosses, setting the terms of their labor and measure of their reward. For more than any of us, they have the freedom to develop right livelihood. Most of us did not learn when we were young that our capacity to be self-loving would be shaped by the work we do and whether that work enhances our well-being. No wonder then that we have become a nation where so many workers feel bad. Jobs depress the spirit. A couple years ago, there was a guy, Andrew Yang, and he was running for president, and he ran on this idea of a universal basic income. And some of the opponents to it were talking about how work is essential to worth, right? Like people feel dignity when they go to work and they do something. And I think that's true in some sense, right? Like, feeling proud of yourself, feeling accomplished. But I feel almost like I was talking about earlier, but it's never just for you, right? Like I was talking about earlier, how like when I was in drama in church, it was not just my innate gift and something I enjoyed to do. It was something that the Lord gave me, right? So sometimes we get in these jobs where it's like, hey, you did a good job. Like I remember my first retail job, we would hit sales goals and all this sort of stuff. Our bosses would say things like, you make us look good, you make our district look good, and all that sort of stuff. And we'd be rewarded with a pizza party. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I would just say that, like, I get that. There is work that I have done that I am proud of. There are things that I do that do give me a sense of dignity, and but it comes from within. And I would just tell you, as someone who's almost 40, has worked a bunch of different jobs, they were all pragmatic. It was literally like, will this put me in the best opportunity, position to take care of my family, right? And none of those jobs brought me dignity. You know what I mean? Like, I would describe, and I wouldn't say that I've been fortunate that I've never had like a job where I was just literally like, I hate this. That's not true. There's one that I can think of where I was like, but that was the environment and the coworkers, and it was awful. And it was just like, nope. So anyway, I'm just connecting those two things because the argument a lot of times against having a more equitable society is because we somehow tie work, like the act of doing a job, essential to the human experience. Like people need to work, but then, and I would say it depends what you mean by work and need. And if they need to do something, if they need to feel accomplished or express themselves, well, they get to determine what that is, or should determine what that is. And like Bella is saying here, maybe you do work you love, but you don't get paid well for it, but you're okay with that. You can make that happen, right? As opposed to, because the whole thing was like, well, we can't provide for people's basic needs as a society because they have to work. You know what I mean? It's such a backwards thinking where it's like, but if we take care of people's basic needs in the society, do you think that maybe they would find more fulfillment? And that that greater sense of fulfillment would then show up in the way we treat others and the way we participate in the workplace, and would it create more loving work environments? You know what I mean? These are all questions. I don't have answers. I'm just pondering out loud. Bringing love into the work environment can create the necessary transformation that can make any job we do, no matter how menial, a place where workers can express the best for themselves. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When we work with love, we renew the spirit. That renewal is an act of self-love. It nurtures our growth. It's not what you do, but how you do it. In the Knitting Sutra, Susan Linden describes the labor of knitting as freely chosen craft that enhances her awareness of the value of right livelihood sharing. What I found in this tiny domestic world of knitting is endless. It runs broader and deeper than anyone might imagine. It is infinite and seemingly inexhaustible in its capacity to inspire, excite, and provoke creative insight. Linden sees the world that we have traditionally thought of as woman's work as a place to discover godliness through the act of creating domestic bliss. A blissful household is where love can flourish. Creating domestic bliss is especially useful for individuals living alone who are just learning to be self-loving. When we intentionally strive to make our homes places where we are ready to give and receive love, every object we place there enhances our well-being. I create themes for my different homes. My flat in the city has the theme of love's meeting place. As a small town person moving to the big city, I found that I needed my environment to truly feel like a sanctuary. Since my one-bedroom flat is so much smaller than the places I had been accustomed to living in, I decided to take only objects I truly loved, the things I felt I could not do without. It is amazing how much stuff you can just let go of. My country place has a desert theme. It's called Soledad Hermosa, beautiful solitude. I go there to be quiet and still and experience the divine, to be renewed. Of all the chapters for this book, this one was the most difficult to write. I think you can tell a little bit. Like, I'm reading it and Belle typically has like the thread, right? The needle and the thread, like, you know, it's the through line there is normally really crystal. And I've even expressed some like, I don't know if that was, so just going off what she's saying here, that feels true to me because I've read her other writings, which seems to be more clear and more fine-tuned. And I'm not saying there's not good stuff here, but I'm just saying like it lacks the flow and the rhythm of her thinking that normally comes through. When I talk with friends and acquaintances about self-love, I was surprised to see how many of us feel troubled by the notion, as though the very idea implies too much narcissism or selfishness. We all need to rid ourselves of misguided notions about self-love. We need to stop fearfully equating it with self-centeredness and selfishness. That's what I grew up with in the church. Self-love is the foundation of our loving practice. Without it, other efforts to love fail. Giving ourselves love, we provide our inner being with the opportunity to have unconditional love that we may have always longed to receive from someone else. Whenever we interact with others, the love we give and receive is always necessarily conditional. Although it is not impossible, it is very difficult and rare for us to be able to extend unconditional love to others, largely because we cannot exercise control over the behavior of someone else, and we cannot predict or utterly control our responses to their actions. We can, however, exercise control over our own actions. We can give ourselves the unconditional love that is the grounding for sustained acceptance and affirmation. When we give this precious gift to ourselves, we are able to reach out to others from a place of fulfillment and not from a place of lack. I do agree with that. A lot of the work that I've done in therapy, in particularly the inner child work, has been a lot of act of self-love, because it's going back to that version of myself that felt a certain way, in seeing him where he's at, loving him unconditionally and accepting him, right? And then also realizing that I'm here because he loved me enough to make the decisions he made to get to where I'm at now, you know? So when I talk to people about this and they ask me about inner child work in particular, if you have questions, let me know. I'll make a whole video about it. The thing that I like to tell them is the common denominator is you always had you. You always had you. The whole time when you're like, I can't make it, I don't know if I can do it. You got you. You had you. You figured it out. And you can look back at that younger version of yourself and go, you did it. And you can look back at them with compassion and understanding, because no one knows better what they were thinking or feeling more than you. And then if you start thinking like, they did what they did because they wanted to be here, right? They wanted to be in the now. They were sending, like, I'm here because 12-year-old me, 13-year-old me, 14-year-old me survived. And so in a way, he is giving me his love and I am giving him my love to heal those wounds that happened at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, whatever. And it creates this circle of love, which is endless and unconditional and exists within myself. And I would like you to know that you can do the same. It's a trip, man. It's a trip, but it's good stuff. Never felt better. And I love, man, like it really is, like, because I think that's the thing, like she's kind of saying, that gets in the way of us loving ourselves, is because the version of us at whatever age the thing happened, you know, that version of us was shamed and put down and led to believe that they were unlovable. And so we adopted that thinking about ourselves. And so part of healing that self-esteem is going to, I don't know, the 7-year-old version of you that thought that they were unlovable, and like visualizing, imagining them, and then going, but you are lovable, and undoing that narrative. And then the fruit of that shows up in the here and now, in your current life. It's powerful stuff, man. Inner child work. I can't recommend it enough. When we give this precious gift to ourselves, we are able to reach out to others from a place of fulfillment and not from a place of lack. One of the best guides to how to be self-loving is to give ourselves the love we are often dreaming about receiving from others. There was a time when I felt lousy about my over 40 body. I saw myself as too fat, too this, or too that. Yet I fantasized about finding a lover who would give me the gift of being loved as I am. It is silly, isn't it, that I would dream of someone else offering to me the acceptance and affirmation I was withholding from myself. This was a moment when the maxim, you can never love anybody if you are unable to love yourself, made clear sense. And I add, do not expect to receive the love from someone else that you do not give. In an ideal world, we would all learn in childhood to love ourselves. We would grow, being secure in our worth and value, spreading love whether we went, letting our light shine. Wherever we went, letting our light shine. If we did not learn self-love in our youth, there is still hope. The light of love is always in us, no matter how cold the flame. It is always present, waiting for the spark to ignite, waiting for the heart to awaken and call us back to the first memory of being the life force inside a dark place waiting to be born, waiting to see the light. So that was the end of chapter 4. Same bat time, same bat channel for chapter 5. My kids are gonna be gone next week, so I hope to finish the rest of the book and post one of these every night for the next few days. If you've liked it, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the doobly-doo below. If you want to see more, there's a playlist. I hope this brought you some comfort. I hope this gave you some insight, and maybe it just helped you fall asleep. If you'd like to interact with me more, you can search Dope Dad over on the Instagrams and over on the TikTok. That's where most of my content is as of right now. And if you would like to interact with me directly, go to the description below, join through the Patreon, and you'll see me there over on our private Discord. Grace and peace, everyone.